Who were the Anunnaki? Gods from the skies. Have you ever looked at the ancient world and wondered, how did they do that? The answer, I believe, might not be found on Earth, but in the stars. Let's travel back in time, thousands of years ago, to ancient Mesopotamia, the land of the Sumerians. This incredible civilization gave us writing, laws, and astronomy. But they also gave us stories of powerful beings who came down from the heavens. They called them the Anunnaki. The name itself means those who from heaven to earth came. Is it possible that these were not just myths? Is it possible these were historical records of real events? The Sumerian texts, written on clay tablets, are some of the oldest writings on the planet. They describe the Anunnaki as gods, but not in the way we think of gods today. They were described as physical beings who ate, drank, and had conflicts just like us. They were rulers, teachers, and masters of incredible technology. The texts say they came from a planet in our own solar system, a planet called Nibiru, with a long elliptical orbit that brings it near Earth only once every 3,600 years. Could this be the truth? The evidence, I believe, is written in stone and clay for all to see, if we are only willing to look. Think about it. Why would an ancient civilization invent such a detailed story? The Sumerians were brilliant observers of the sky. They mapped the stars and understood the movements of the planets we know today. So when they wrote about another planet, Nibiru, and visitors from that planet, should we just dismiss it as fantasy? I say no. I believe they were recording their history. They were telling us in the clearest way they could that they were not alone. They were telling us that their gods were not imaginary spirits, but flesh and blood beings who walked the earth beside them. These texts are not just simple stories. They are filled with incredible details about the Anunnaki leaders, like Anu, Enlil, and Enki. They describe their roles, their decisions, and their impact on humanity. The tablets talk about these beings establishing the first cities on Earth in the region of Sumer, places like Eridu, Nippur, and Ur. Is it a coincidence that these are the very first cities known to modern archaeology? I don't think so. The connection is right there, waiting for us to connect the dots. The Sumerians were telling us exactly who founded their civilization. The question is, are we listening? So what if the stories are true? The ancient astronaut theory proposes a radical but simple idea. The Anunnaki were not gods, but extraterrestrial visitors. They were astronauts from another world. According to the texts interpreted by scholars like Zecharia Sitchin, the Anunnaki came to Earth for a specific reason: to mine gold. Their home planet Nibiru was having an atmospheric crisis, and they needed gold particles to repair it. Earth, it turned out, was rich in this precious metal. It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But is it? Today, our own scientists talk about using gold particles in technology, and even for atmospheric shielding. This theory suggests that the Anunnaki's journey to Earth was a massive undertaking. They established a base of operations, a colonial expedition. The leaders stayed in orbit, while the working-class Anunnaki, known as the Igigi, came down to the surface to do the hard labor in the mines of southern Africa. The texts describe their struggles, their long hours, and their eventual rebellion against the difficult work. It's an incredible story of cosmic labor disputes. Could these ancient myths actually be describing the social and political challenges of an extraterrestrial mining operation that took place thousands of years ago on our own planet? The story gets even more fascinating. When the Igigi miners rebelled, the Anunnaki leaders needed a new workforce. The chief scientist, a being named Enki, came up with a solution. He proposed creating a primitive worker. How? By taking an existing hominid on Earth, what we might call early man, and upgrading their DNA using the Anunnaki's own genetic material. The texts describe this process in detail. They say they created the first human, called the Adamu, in their own image. Is it possible that the missing link in human evolution isn't a link at all, but a massive leap forward, engineered by these visitors from the stars? This idea is revolutionary. It suggests that humanity itself is a hybrid species, part earthly primate and part extraterrestrial god. This could explain so much. It could explain the sudden explosion of human intelligence and civilization with the Sumerians. It could explain why ancient texts from all over the world, from the Bible to the Popol Vuh, talk about gods creating humanity from clay and breathing life into them. Are these all just different versions of the same core event? A story passed down through generations of how our ancestors were created in a laboratory by beings from another world. The evidence, I believe, is overwhelming. The Anunnaki were not just miners, they were our first teachers. The Sumerian king list, an ancient document, lists all the kings of Sumer and the incredible lengths of their reigns, often thousands of years. Mainstream historians say these are myths, but what if they are not? What if the Anunnaki, with their advanced biology and technology, had much longer lifespans than humans? And what if these first kings were actually the Anunnaki themselves, ruling directly over their new human workers? They taught humanity agriculture, writing, law, and science. They essentially gave us the blueprint for civilization. The stories depict the Anunnaki as having incredible powers. They could fly through the sky in what the texts call sky chariots or whirlwinds, which honestly sound a lot like modern aircraft or helicopters. They wielded powerful weapons that could level mountains and boil seas. The texts describe events like the Great Flood, not as an act of a mystical god, but as a deliberate decision made by the Anunnaki Council. Enlil, the commander, was fed up with the noise and chaos of humanity and decided to wipe the slate clean. But Enki, the creator, secretly warned a loyal human, Utnapishtim, to build an ark. Does this story sound familiar? It's almost identical to the story of Noah. The relationship between the Anunnaki and their human creations was complicated. They were our masters, but also our parents. The texts are full of stories about Anunnaki gods taking human partners and having children with them. These demigods, or heroes of old, are mentioned in texts around the world. Think of the Greek myths of Hercules, son of Zeus. Could these stories be a memory of a time when the children of the stars walked among us? A time when the line between God and human was blurred because of genetic intermingling. The evidence is everywhere. These beings were not always in agreement. The tablets describe intense rivalries and even wars between different Anunnaki factions, especially between the followers of Enlil and Enki. These conflicts were fought on Earth, with humans often caught in the middle, serving as soldiers in the armies of their respective gods. Could the epic battles described in ancient texts, like the Mahabharata from India with its descriptions of powerful vimanas and devastating weapons, actually be accounts of these Anunnaki wars? It's a stunning possibility. The gods of myth were not fighting in some spiritual realm. They were fighting right here, in our skies and on our lands. Now let's look at the physical evidence. All around the world, we find massive megalithic structures that defy explanation. Think of the Great Pyramid of Giza, Pumapunku in Bolivia, or Stonehenge in England. Mainstream archaeology tells us these were built with simple tools and human labor. But I ask you, is that really possible? Look at the precision-cut stones at Pumapunku with interlocking H-blocks that are almost impossible to replicate even today. Look at the massive granite blocks of the pyramids, weighing tens of tons each, lifted hundreds of feet into the air. How? The ancient astronaut theory offers a logical, if extraordinary, explanation. The Anunnaki had the technology. They had the tools. They had the knowledge of engineering, mathematics, and astronomy that would have made building these monuments simple. Is it possible that these incredible structures were not tombs or temples, but something else entirely? Perhaps they were power plants, navigational beacons, or landing platforms for their spacecraft. The alignment of many of these sites with specific constellations, like Orion's belt, suggests a deep cosmic connection, a connection, I believe, to their home among the stars. Of course, the mainstream scientific community rejects these ideas. They say there is no physical proof, no crashed spaceship, no alien skeleton, no advanced computer chip found in a tomb. They argue that the Sumerian texts are simply mythology, creative stories meant to explain the world, not record history. They believe that attributing these ancient achievements to aliens is an insult to the ingenuity of our ancestors. They say we should celebrate human accomplishment, not give the credit to extraterrestrials. And this is a valid point of view that we must consider, but I ask you to keep an open mind. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Perhaps the evidence is right in front of us, but we are interpreting it incorrectly. We see a god in a relief carving. They see an astronaut in a helmet. We read a myth about a flying chariot. They read a flight log. Both sides look at the same ancient tablets and massive stones, but see a completely different story. The believers see a history of cosmic contact. The doubters see a history of human imagination. Both sides are passionate. So the question remains for you to answer. Were the gods of our ancestors truly divine, or were they flesh and blood visitors from another world who we simply misunderstood?